Immediately, Mike brought her in, and his mother saw her. She began screaming and running away. But when the man looked at his girlfriend, she looked normal to him. Mike had always been the pride of his village, leaving behind the quiet life to pursue success in the bustling city. Despite the distance, he regularly sent money and visited his parents, promising to bring home the right woman someday. Life seemed perfect until one Sunday after church, when Mike noticed a striking young woman named Linda. She stood apart from the crowd, and Mike, intrigued, approached her. They quickly struck up a conversation, and Linda revealed it was her first visit to the church, having just moved to the city. Their conversation flowed easily, but Mike noticed Linda always avoided eye contact. He jokingly teased her about it, but she claimed it was just her shy nature. Despite this odd behavior, Mike grew fond of Linda. They spent more time together, and Mike began to fall for her. His friends, however, were concerned about Linda's strange mannerisms, especially her avoidance of eye contact. Mike dismissed their worries, confident that Linda was just unique, and continued their relationship. After a month, Mike decided to take Linda to meet his parents in the village. Although Linda hesitated, she agreed to the trip. They arrived at dusk, and Mike's parents welcomed them warmly. However, as soon as Linda entered the house, Mike's mother, Agnes, felt uneasy. There was something about Linda that didn't sit right with her, but she couldn't pinpoint what. During dinner, Agnes noticed Linda avoiding eye contact again, deepening her discomfort. Later that night, Agnes couldn't shake her uneasy feelings and whispered to her husband, John, that something was wrong with Linda. John dismissed her, but Agnes couldn't ignore her instincts. After the evening ended, Mike and Linda retired to the guest room. Agnes couldn't sleep, her mind troubled by the strange woman in their home. At 2 a.m, Agnes went outside to use the bathroom, but when she returned, she froze in terror. In the yard, Agnes saw Linda, her body twisted unnaturally. Linda's limbs moved like a snake, and as Agnes watched in horror, Linda transformed into a massive python, her eyes glowing bright red. Paralyzed by fear, Agnes stumbled back inside, unable to believe what she had just witnessed. She spent the rest of the night shaken, trying to make sense of what she had seen. The next morning, she knew she had to warn Mike. Agnes, still shaken, decided to tell Mike what had happened. She gathered her courage and explained the events of the previous night, telling him that Linda had transformed into a snake. Mike, though concerned, was skeptical and brushed it off, attributing it to a bad dream. Agnes, desperate, pleaded with him to reconsider, but Mike was firm in his decision. He insisted that Linda was the woman he loved, and nothing would change his mind. Despite his mother's warnings, Mike and Linda married in a small ceremony in the village. While Mike was happy, Agnes remained uneasy, watching Linda from the corner of her eye. Life seemed normal, but Agnes couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Then, one night, Mike awoke to find Linda missing from their bed. He searched the house, growing anxious, until he reached the parlor. In the dim light, he saw a massive snake coiled on the floor, its glowing red eyes staring at him. Frozen in place, Mike realized with horror that the creature before him was Linda, transformed once again. The chilling sight left him speechless, the nightmare he had never believed now standing before him in the dark. Mike stood frozen, staring at the massive python with glowing red eyes. His heart hammered in his chest, unable to comprehend the sight before him. The fear felt too real to be a hallucination. Suddenly, the snake slithered away, disappearing under a nearby chair. Mike, driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, knelt beside it, but the snake was gone, no trace, nothing. His mind raced as he wondered if he was imagining things. A soft creak from behind interrupted his thoughts. Linda appeared at the door, calm and serene. "Mike," she said softly, "why are you up so late?" Mike, still shaken, asked where she had been. She smiled, explaining she had been in the toilet longer than she realized. He wanted to confront her, but the look in her eyes made him hesitate. Instead, He nodded and followed her back to the bedroom, convincing himself it was just exhaustion. As they lay in bed, Linda curled up next to him. Mike's mind kept racing, but he tried to push the terrifying image of the glowing red eyes from his thoughts. Linda whispered soothingly, urging him to sleep, but Mike couldn't relax. His heart continued to race as he lay there, unable to ignore the unease that gnawed at him. Hours later, Mike awoke to find Linda gone. His chest tightened, and the air in the room felt charged with something sinister. Suddenly, Linda's red eyes gleamed in the darkness as she transformed into a massive python once again. She leaned close to him and whispered, "I'm taking you somewhere tomorrow, Mike." Her words trailed off, leaving him in a cold sweat, unable to understand the full extent of what was happening. Months passed, and Linda's behavior only grew stranger. She avoided him at night, spent long hours in the bathroom, and seemed distant. Mike tried to ignore it, but deep down, he knew something was wrong. One morning, Linda announced she was pregnant. Mike, excited, celebrated the news, but Linda's response was chilling. "I don't want this." Her cold detachment confused him further, and she muttered something about not being pregnant, though she didn't explain. Despite her efforts to rid herself of the baby, the pregnancy continued. One night, Linda whispered darkly, "I am a goddess, a serpent of the underworld. This child shouldn't be." The baby arrived on a stormy night, perfect and healthy, but Linda's indifference to the child was cold and unsettling. She barely acknowledged him, her resentment palpable. One day, Mike heard the baby crying, but the sound was coming from the bathroom. Rushing to the room, he saw the python coiled around his son's crib, its red eyes fixed on him. Frozen with fear, Mike ran to grab the cutlass his father had given him. He returned to the bathroom, heart pounding, determined to protect his child. But what happened next was beyond anything he had ever imagined. Mike stood frozen in the bathroom doorway, staring in shock at the snake coiling around his baby. Its red eyes locked onto his, and terror gripped his heart. For a brief moment, Mike couldn't move, but the sound of his son's cries snapped him back to reality. He sprinted to his room, grabbed the cutlass from the wardrobe, and whispered, "I have to protect my child." With the blade in hand, he rushed back toward the bathroom, determination flooding through him. The snake still circled his son, its forked tongue flicking as it prepared to strike. Mike didn't hesitate. With a cry, he swung the cutlass, striking the snake's head with a sickening thud. Blood splattered across the floor as the snake hissed violently, writhing in pain. Mike swung again, his heart racing as the creature's body convulsed. "Stay away from my son!" he shouted, watching as the snake's red eyes dulled, its movements slowing. But then something horrifying began to happen. The snake's body convulsed again, its scales rippling and melting away. Mike gasped as the massive form of the snake shrank, folding into itself. Before his eyes, the creature morphed into a pale woman lying in a pool of blood. Linda. Mike staggered back, dropping the cutlass, his mind spinning in disbelief. The woman gasped weakly, "Mike, help me!" Linda's skin began to peel away, revealing a young woman beneath, Emiliana. Her voice trembled as she explained that she had been trapped in the snake form by a curse cast by her grandmother. She had been controlled by the snake coven for years, but Mike had broken the curse by killing the snake. "I'm free now," Emiliana said, tears streaming down her face. Mike, still in shock, struggled to process her words. "I didn't want this," Emiliana continued. "The coven controlled me. Linda was just a name they made me take on." Over the following days, Emiliana's presence in Mike's life grew more natural. They spent time together, and Mike began to feel a connection with her beyond the past. His mother, who had always been suspicious of Linda, came to accept Emiliana after hearing her story. "You're different," Mike's mother said, her wariness replaced by understanding. Emiliana smiled softly, grateful for the second chance. As time passed, Mike and Emiliana's bond deepened. Mike proposed to Emiliana, not out of obligation, but out of love. Their wedding, simple but joyful, marked a fresh start for their family. Mike's mother, now fully accepting, welcomed Emiliana with open arms. I hope you enjoy the story. Please help us grow by liking our video, subscribing to our channel, and sharing the video to family and friends.